everyone. My name is Janine Yazi, and I'm from the Dene Nation, also known as the Navajo Nation, down in the southwest of the United States.
Kolomosi, everybody. My name is Travis Matukwison. I'm from the Stockbridge-Muncie Band of Mohicans. We're currently located in north central Wisconsin, but we are originally from the northeastern region.
We want to say hello to Yusef Zulin of Moulizliman University.
We'll be giving a general overview of the history of the colonization of Native Americas.
In 1492, Christopher Columbus set sail to discover the New World, or so he thought. He ended up landing in the Caribbean islands, and specifically on the island of Trinidad, where he met what were later known as the Arawak people, very peaceful people. There's a common misconception that Columbus knew or thought he was sailing to India or finding a path to India, but India was not a country. It did not exist as India at the time. Instead, the word Indians comes from the mannerisms of the people that he encountered, who are very peaceful people and very generous. The accounts of the people that were keeping a record of their exploration speak to the kindness and the generosity of the communities that they were greeted by. And they started to call the people Indios, people that were in God. A very painful part of our history is that this is what led to them being massively exploited and murdered in very inhumane ways by these invaders, who then took a large group of them back to Spain as slaves.
The history related to the explorations that led to the discovery of what is the countries of the Western Hemisphere were all intended to increase capitalism, increase wealth. So Christopher Columbus's voyage was sponsored by the King and Queen of Spain. There's old legal terminology, which some of you may be familiar with, which is called the Doctrine of Discovery. This doctrine is based off of Christian ideologies, but also within these ideologies are embedded racially discriminatory methodologies for extracting riches from non-Christian people. There's a concept within the Doctrine of Discovery called terra nullius, which says that any people who are not of the Christian faith are allowed to be conquered, and their lands and their resources available to be taken by force if necessary by a Christian nation. So this is the practice that the Spaniards came in to the New World with, and with the intentions to take as much riches as they could from this place.
North America, commonly referred to as Turtle Island by many of the indigenous tribes that are the original inhabitants, was attacked on all sides, essentially. The Dutch, the French, and the English came in from the northeast, whereas the Spaniards came in from the south, through South America and through a route from the Caribbean to Florida. And all of them learned from each other through this first wave of colonization how to justify the brutality that they visited on the inhabitants that they came across, based on their religious values and doctrines. Just like Travis laid out, those doctrines laid the foundation for not only claiming lands and minerals, but also claiming people. We often look at and understand the brutalities of slavery, but slavery began with our own indigenous peoples being taken and used for sexual exploitation and for labor and conquest of other peoples and other lands, because all the people that were encountered were of distinct nations. And what predicated the brutal expansion was the spread of European diseases brought over by these invaders. And so that weakened many communities, even years before they actually made contact, because of how fast those diseases spread.
So a lot of the diseases were brought intentionally. Well, a lot of them unintentionally as well. But because we did not have the immune systems, have not been exposed to certain illnesses that came from Europe. So our bodies never had the opportunity to build the antibodies to fight these diseases. But also diseases were being used in a form of warfare. So early on, some of the first colonies that had established on Turtle Island are the Jamestown colony, Plymouth colony, and Massachusetts Bay colonies. During this time, there was a conflict called the Pequot Wars. And during this time is when some of the European colonists began spreading smallpox, so smallpox-laden blankets to their Native American neighbors, and this was devastating. It wiped out, some people say, somewhere up to 90% of the population of Native Americans in the Northeast. So with the disbursement of these smallpox-laden blankets was the first assault biological warfare here on Turtle Island. And as a result of that, we've seen uprisings that came in the years to come, revolts by Native American groups, Metacom, King Philip's War as it's called. He led a small confederacy against the colonists. He was very successful in his actions against them, and at one point people were fleeing the colonies that had established to hide out in the barricaded city of Boston, what is today Boston. And this was a response. This was a response to the forced colonization and the attacks that were being placed upon the Native American populations at the time.
Up until that period, there was always this hope that these invaders or these people who were here would not be able to permanently stay. But with the establishment of settlements from each of these entities that were coming in, it allowed for these foreigners to set up a base by which they increased westward expansion exponentially. A lot of times their pathways of conquest were lessened or made easier because of the biological warfare that was waged, and they came across entire communities and nations that were already decimated by that or had to move because of the results of the sickness that was spread. And this all became reinforcement for these invaders that manifest destiny was playing in their favor, and that somehow this was just being, this land and these communities and these resources were open for their ownership and their claim. Because a lot of nations were extremely weakened both by the violence and by the spread of disease and by the seizure of their homelands, their hunting grounds, and the economies, essentially, the ways that they built the economies that they used to sustain themselves, many nations were trying to still seek peace with these invaders. And it led to a whole series of complex relationships where, in trying to negotiate what this peace looked like, our nations tried to learn more about these foreigners, and a series of agreements. This is how the treaties started to be developed, and institutions started to be developed to start to indoctrinate Native peoples into European forms of thinking. And this all laid the foundations for the boarding schools and the advent of reservation systems that our people still deal with today.
The United States began implementing systematic ways to assimilate Native Americans out of their tribal cultures and attempting to assimilate them into the common American culture. And part of that system was boarding schools. So these boarding schools were set up to take young Native American children away from their homes, away from their families, and to put them in these institutions, institutions that denied them the ability to practice any form of their culture, whether it was spiritual, religious, speaking their own language. Things like this were denied to these young children. Also in these schools, a lot of these children were being sexually abused by these people that were supposed to be caring for them. We see the onslaught. Well, with the wars and the removals, all these different colonial aggressions that we experience as Native Americans, the boarding school era and the boarding school experience just exemplified and increased the intergenerational traumas that we experience as Native American people, and it has been very detrimental to our communities in so many ways. The abuse of alcohol and drugs can be directly tied into these traumas that we've experienced through this intergenerational trauma, and the loss of culture and language and all these different things. This system has really plagued us in so many ways and destroyed our communities. I feel like we're finally rising up as Native American people. We're taking a stand that we're not going to be victimized anymore, that we're going to assert our sovereignty and our self-determination in order to improve our communities, to become healthy again. And this is some of what we're seeing here in Standing Rock. Actually, a lot of what we're seeing. That's what this movement is based off of. And it's tied into our culture. It's tied into the importance of protecting our mother, protecting the earth. Because this is where we get our power from. This is where our cultures have been birthed from, is from the earth and from the water. That's why there's so many nations here, so many indigenous people here at Standing Rock who have came to support, because we all share that. We all share those same values. It's turned into a global movement, and it's indigenous people leading that fight. And we're going to be the ones to remind everybody how to be human when everyone else has forgotten their original instructions. We're going to hold on to that. And that's also part of our responsibility as Native American people, as indigenous people, is to hold on to those original instructions that we were given, because the majority of the world have forgotten that. They forgot what their original instructions were. So part of our job is to remind everybody what it is to be a human being again.
I wish we had more time to go into more detail about all the intricacies of this, but thank you, Husa, for allowing us to have this opportunity, and I hope that it was helpful in some way to continue your education into the complexities about our relationship to colonization and to find similarities between our people and yours in our battle to decolonize our people and restore our humanity and our earth.
Thank you, Moles Lemon University. I hope this information is useful to you, and enjoy your course.